Hello, this is the video for Wednesday, November 11th in 11th grade. We are today looking at the myth of the Wild West through yet another cultural artifact, which this time is music. So you'll explore the Wild West through your own selection of music or through ones that I've suggested, and then we'll use that to look at the idea of mood. And then finally we'll read chapter 2 of True Grit. We'll do that again, the same chapter tomorrow, so we'll stretch it over 2 days. And the stem is True Grit reveals a mood of ruthlessness. So you can kind of see where mood in our discussion will take us. Right, so day 3. The myth of the Wild West through music. I'm going to read the slide. This narrative persists well into today through the genre of country music. If you know country well, this is a chance to clip 1 or 2 of your favorite songs for the Big Google Doc, but if not, you can use some of the ones I've pulled. We are looking for songs that give us that feeling of the Wild West, or they bring in some mythical element of the Wild West. There are so many. And so I'll show you a couple, but I'm going to include some genres you can use. Country Western is really a direct descendant of the Western feel, the Western motif. But there's also others, mariachi music, which is a really important Mexican music form that was really predominant in the Southwest and in the West as the country was being settled. Cowboy ballads, which is a much more specific subset of country Western music. Bluegrass, which is really about the Appalachian music tradition, but Appalachia has these same qualities of feeling West to the people who are on the East Coast, feeling somehow country. And so some of the same themes of the West come up in bluegrass music. And then the blues, which shared a lineage with bluegrass and came from the South, from really New Orleans coming up through the Mississippi River and into the other parts of the country. All of these genres have the possibility of the Western motif inside of them. So what you're looking for is some lyrics, really, sometimes the musical instruments themselves, that remind you of some of the things we've been talking about with the West. Wide open spaces, cowboys, people being whisked away into the sunset, all of these romantic notions of the West. So that will be the majority of the work for the first part of class, going through your Big Google Doc and exploring the music listed or pulling your own. And here are a couple of other tracks from other teachers that are suggested. I'm going to bring us to the Big Google Doc and the ones I've suggested. I've put Home on the Range there. This is a Roy Rogers song. You might know it. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play. Cowboy Take Me Away and Friends in Low Places are both like 90s country western songs that are my choices. And then Wagon Wheel is a little bit more popular now. So these are 3 I've suggested. I'm saying, what is the mood of the song in a few words? What is it saying? Pick 2 or 3. Because I would really like you to consider doing your own if you feel comfortable doing that. If you feel like you have enough knowledge of country Western music or of music that is somehow borrowing these ideas of the West, then it would be really interesting to see what you pull. So you don't have to do mine at all. You can do 2 of your own. And you're listening for mood. So what is mood? Let's write this down. Mood is the emotional atmosphere of the work. In this case, of the song. Emotional words. Words like joyful, or upbeat, or tired. The mood that you'll see me use later with True Grit is ruthless. And that too is a feeling. So you're looking for the feeling of the song. And then with a couple of words, what is it saying? So I can't play Home on the Range because I'm so worried about copyright, but I'm going to sing a little bit of it for you and then clip the mood. So it goes, home, home on the range. Can't play it. You can already hear that strong violin, fiddle music coming in. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play. Let's look at the other lyrics here. This is what you'll be doing too. Seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Really already capturing that idea of this romantic vast space. Now let's look at the next verse here. The red man was pressed from this part of the west. It's not likely he'll ever return to the banks of Red River, where seldom, if ever, his flickering campfires still burn. Wow. So this, to me, is a mood of real sadness. I sense that even in the writer, but it's also troublesome. So I'm going to say mood. Both romance of the spaces and sadness to have lost the Indian. Message seems to be about settling this space and feeling both joyous about its possibilities, but sad at what it cost. So that's what I'm hoping you do for a couple of your own songs. Okay, so after the song activity, we're really devoting the rest of class to the book, and we're trying to capture the mood of the book. What is the mood of the novel so far? Its atmosphere. I'm going to offer a few words that make sense to me as I read it. There is this ruthless quality. Ruthless doesn't have to mean cruel. Ruthless just means absence of feeling. And I see that a little bit with Maddie as she seeks her father with a real purpose that is based in practical rendering of a crime instead of being emotional. So there's a ruthlessness there, and we're going to see that in this chapter as well. When they hang 3 criminals for doing wrong, there's not really a sense of sadness about that. It's just that, no, these people killed people, they then must die. And that's all. So there's an even-handed justice. That's the atmosphere that I'm getting. But there's lots of other atmospheres that you might be feeling. And we talk about that a little bit in class. And then I asked the question, what has exposition showed us so far? So exposition is when the author tells us various things about the setting, characters, and plot to set up the story. So when I'm noticing the exposition of the story, the way that the author sets up the plot, setting, and characters, I'm seeing a lot of exposition in the beginning to learn about Maddie as a 14-year-old girl, and to learn about her character as one who is really interested in seeking revenge for her father's murder in a really practical way. And the plot, she's pretty basic about that too. She's just going to go and find her father's killer, and that's going to be that. We're going to learn today other pieces of exposition about finding the right man for the job to help her with this journey and with this task. So that will matter when you go into your mood stems. But for now, let's read the book a little bit. We're in chapter 2, and it's pretty short. We'll read chapter 2 today, so you're reading it on your own in async time, and then we'll talk about it tomorrow in class. I'm going to read a little, but I can't read all of it because we've run out of time. So just follow along and then read the rest on your own, please. Chapter 2. Lawyer Daggett had gone to Helena to try one of his steamboat suits, and so Yarnell and I rode the train to Fort Smith to see about Papa's body. I took around $100 expense money and wrote myself out a letter of identification and signed Lawyer Daggett's name to it, and had Mama sign it as well. She was in bed. There were no seats to be had in the coaches. The reason for this was there was to be a triple hanging at the federal courthouse in Fort Smith, and people from as far away as East Texas and North Louisiana were going up to see it. It was like an excursion trip. We rode in a colored coach, and Yarnell got us a trunk to sit on. Colored is the old-fashioned word to describe African Americans in this world. When the conductor came through, he said, "Get that trunk out of the aisle." I replied to him in this way, "We will move the trunk, but there is no reason for you to be so hateful about it." He did not say anything to that, but went on taking tickets. He saw that I had brought to all the darkies' attention how little he was. We stood up all the way, but I was young and did not mind. On the way, we had a good lunch of spare ribs that Yarnell had brought along in a sack. I noticed that the houses in Fort Smith were numbered, but it was no city at all compared to Little Rock. I thought then, and still think, that Fort Smith ought to be in Oklahoma instead of Arkansas, though of course it was not Oklahoma across the river, but the Indian Territory. They have that big wide street there called Garrison Avenue, like places out in the west. The buildings are made of fieldstone, and all the windows need washing. I know many fine people live in Fort Smith, and they have one of the nation's most modern waterworks, but it does not look like it belongs in Arkansas to me. There was a jailer at the sheriff's office, and he said we would have to talk to the city police or the high sheriff about the particulars of Papa's death. The sheriff had gone to the hanging. The undertaker was not open. He had left a notice on his door saying that he would be back after the hanging. We went to the Monarch boarding house, but there was no one there except a poor old woman with cataracts on her eyes. She said everybody had gone to the hanging but her. She would not let us in to see about Papa's traps. At the city police station we found 2 officers, but they were having a fist fight and not available for inquiries. Yarnell wanted to see the hanging, but he did not want me to go, so he said we should go back to the sheriff's office and wait there until everybody got back. I did not much care to see it, but I saw he wanted to, and so I said no, we would go to the hanging, but I would not tell Mama about it. That was what he was worried about. The federal courthouse was up by the river on a little rise, and the big gallows were hard beside it. About 1,000 or more people, 50 or 60 dogs, had gathered there to see the show. I believe a year or 2 later they put up a wall around the place, and you had to have a pass from the marshal's office to get in, but at this time it was open to the public. A noisy boy was going through the crowd selling parched peanuts and fudge. Another one was selling hot tamales out of a bucket. This is a cornmeal tube, filled with spicy meat that they eat in old Mexico. They are not bad. I had never seen one before. When we got there, the preliminaries were just about over. 2 white men and an Indian were standing up there on the platform with their hands tied behind them, and the 3 nooses hanging loose behind their heads. They were all wearing new jeans and flannel shirts buttoned at the neck. The hangman was a thin, bearded man named George Maladon. He was wearing 2 long pistols. He was a Yankee, and they say he would not hang a man who had been in the GAR. A marshal read the sentences, but his voice was low and we could not make out what he was saying. We pushed up closer. A man with a Bible talked to each of the men for a minute. I took him for a preacher. He led them in singing Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound, and some people in the crowd joined in. Then Maladon put the nooses on their necks and tightened up the knots just the way he wanted them. He went to each man with a black hood and asked him if he had any last words before he put it on him. The first one was a white man, and he looked put out by it all, but not upset, as you might expect from a man in his desperate situation. He said, "Well, I killed the wrong man, and that is why I am here. If I had killed the man I meant to, I don't believe I would have been convicted. I see men out there in that crowd that is worse than me." The Indian was next, and he said, "I am ready. I have repented my sins, and soon I will be in heaven with Christ my Savior. Now I must die like a man." If you are like me, you probably think of Indians as heathens, but I will ask you to recall the thief on the cross. He was never baptized and never heard of a catechism, and yet Christ himself promised him a place in heaven. The last one had a little speech ready. You could tell he had learned by heart. He had long yellow hair. He was older than the other 2, being around 30 years of age. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my last thoughts are of my wife and my 2 little dear boys who are far away on the Cimarron River. I don't know what is to become of them. I hope and pray that people will not slight them and compel them to go into low company on account of the disgrace I have brought them. You see what I have come to because of drink. I killed my best friend in a trifling quarrel over a pocket knife. I was drunk, and it could have just as easily been my brother. If I had received good instruction as a child, I would be with my family today and at peace with my neighbors. I hope and pray that all you parents in the sound of my voice will train up your children in the way they should go. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone." Okay, read the rest on your own, please, and dear Stem.